Anyway, I'm playing the cuts, and so we'll come back here. Marky, Billson, Tri-Cities Sports Now, on with one of my favorite guests. It's Vito Stellino, and this is a man, I mentioned this at the start, I mean, he covered the Paper Lion Detroit Lions, the great Steelers teams of the 70s, the Baltimore Colts when they moved to Baltimore I'm going to ask you this, of all the scuzzy sports moves in history, from Brooklyn going to Los Angeles to Cleveland going to Baltimore, that sort of thing, where would you say that the Colts move from Baltimore to Indianapolis was the scuzziest, or would you choose another franchise relocation, Vito Stellino, as even being, say, less ethical?
ramifications are actually huge. Once they left, the Orioles had the crowd to build Camden Yards, which changed baseball stadiums throughout the country.
Sure.
So that, if the Orioles, the Colts had stayed, they probably would have built another combination stadium. And, I mean, the Ursa's, they just ran one of the great teams into the ground. And Frank DeFord said if you could spoil, football in Baltimore, could be ruined on the water at Lure. I think that's something that's well.
And Frank DeFord is a guy who, I mean, I had one conversation with him once for an article, and it was on Burt Rechichar, who fans around here will know because he was such a star at Tennessee way back when, but in the 50s and all that. But, yeah, that was his favorite Colt. There you go. I bet people didn't know that. Frank DeFord's favorite football player was Burt Rechichar, the great Tennessee Volunteer who at one time had the record for the longest field goal in the NFL. We're talking now to Vito Stellino here, and let's stay modern. You've written a column on your website, VitoStellino.com, in support of Colin Kaepernick. You think that in future generations, people will look at Kaepernick and maybe as something of a Muhammad Ali type figure, that sort of thing. I want to ask you, how do you come to that when you also understand there is some recklessness with Colin Kaepernick after, the tweeting, let's say, for the Black Panthers, the support from Cuba, or even in a lot of his criticisms of the police, I can tell you, in my opinion, have been unjust. I've seen some, this was a case where, they shot an innocent man, and I didn't think that man was so innocent, to be brutally honest with you, Vito. I want to ask you, why do you think Kaepernick will be positively viewed in future generations?
You know the history of the country. It's, our founding fathers had slaves. They said blacks were 3/5 of a person. We fought a civil war to overcome that. Then they had Jim Crow was upheld by the Supreme Court. How does that decision be viewed in history,
Yeah.
And the police are shooting people who are running away from them in the back. Now, is that, regardless of what's happening to the person, you don't shoot people in the back.
No, you don't. No one would argue that. I wonder, one could ask, though, is, say, kneeling for the American flag, which is supposed to be this great unifying symbol, almost thumbing your nose at the idea of unifying and stopping people from being shot in the back, that sort of thing. I think that would be the counter-argument to what Kaepernick, his protest movement was. Do you think his collusion case is going to be successful? I know you're not an attorney, but what does your gut tell you?
I don't think it makes any difference. Whether Lewis Kaepernick is going to become he will remember as an iconic person. The bottom line is the NFL is banning it, whether or not you can prove, it's hard to prove collusion, but it's obvious there are not 60 quarterbacks in the NFL better than he is. I mean, I think you would agree to that, right?
I actually was never a Kaepernick fan. I mean, I never thought he should have been on the field over Alex Smith back in the day. I was almost like, why did they do this? Alex Smith has got it right now and all this. And myself not being that big of a fan of the running quarterback, I mean, I'll give you an example here. Terry Bradshaw, when he quit scrambling, that's when the passing game for the Steelers really took off. Before then, he was kind of known as just some guy that handed off to Franco Harris, that sort of thing. I've always felt you're better off with the play beginning 10 yards down the field than 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That's my opinion. So, I mean, could he have made, number 60 or so? He had been a starter, but the team was dropping like a brick, and I mean, even Chip Kelly couldn't get anything, out of him in his final year. So, I wonder, if he really was the future at that time. Could I have seen somebody make okay, we need a quarterback, and here, this veteran backup. Hey, Ryan Leaf stayed in the NFL that way. I can see that, but I don't know if it was ever destined for him to be a starter again.
Well, but he should not have been. He should not have been banned. He never got a chance.
I'm not a fan of blackballing. I'll be honest with you there, Vito.
Yeah, the NFL has made Colin Kaepernick an iconic figure because it'll be remembered that they banned him from the league, and that's the kind of thing we do in America. They never give him a chance. Tim Tebow was a controversial figure. Belichick gave him a chance, Andy Reid gave him a chance, the Jets gave him a chance, and all those teams said, well, they couldn't make it. No one ever gave Kaepernick that chance, and he did take a team to the Super Bowl, too,
He had, yes. I mean, it was 5 years ago, and I mean, we can debate that, Mark Ripien, 5 years after he took the Redskins to the Super Bowl. I'm trying to think. I remember he was a backup for the Browns, but I don't think he was in the league in '96. You can check that. But I'm asking 5 years down the road, and I'm trying to think of a Super Bowl quarterback. Ripien won it at Super Bowl 26 for the Redskins, but he was soon out of a job after that. Is my point. I mean, so it does happen. Trent Dilfer, that sort of thing. Anyway, I look at this. You mentioned Tim Tebow, and yeah, he got picked up by a lot of teams. That's true. I'm not sure he was given the position to succeed, though, after he was cut by the Broncos with the Patriots and the Jets and the Eagles. I mean, he was looked at as being a backup or so. That Kaepernick, obviously, that was going to be his team for some time, and he lost his job at one point to Blaine Gabbert.
That's not true.
Okay.
He was hurt. And Gabbert started the first 5 or 6 games, and he finished the season at 16 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions playing on a bad team.
That's the one argument. I mean, the only thing I would say is, like I said, the running quarterback was Kaepernick all legs. I remember the worst quarterback rating from the pocket. I can't give you the number off the top of my head, but that was what was said. And it got me thinking, okay, yeah, that's the guy who's all legs, if you're the worst rated quarterback from the pocket. And like I said, I mean, the Marky Billson offensive philosophy, remember, we were talking about Super Bowl VI. Remember that highlight film? The scramble is not Tom Landry's favorite play, that sort of thing. And I guess that's the same way that I feel as well with that. A lot can go wrong. In my way of looking at it historically, I think running quarterbacks have actually been sacked more than drop back ones. Look at Randall Cunningham. When he was the Eagles, they once suffered 104 sacks one year. That's the NFL record.
You're not looking at the big picture.
Okay.
The point is that they won't give a chance. That's the issue.
I see that, and that was going to be my next question. I mean, I think Michael Sam was blackballed myself. And the reason being is that I think that he came in very flamboyantly. I'm going to have my own reality show, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea in NFL culture is, excuse me, you're a 7th-round draft choice on a not-so-good team. What are you doing with a reality show? Sam played very well in the preseason, but he didn't make the St. Louis Rams back in the day. And outside of a cup of coffee on the Cowboys, practice squad, that was about it for him. But I guess my question is, though, you've covered the NFL so long, don't you think, though, that the NFL, it's very militaristic culture, and they really do, that culture that they have there looks down their nose at someone who is flamboyant or somebody who is kind of willing to be an individual. The NFL generally doesn't like that in their culture. That's what I've found in covering it. Have you found that?
Well, yes. Have you heard of the book Big Game?
I have heard of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, well, read it. As the guy says, the NFL succeeds despite the people who are running it.
And I'll buy that. No, Vito, when I used to cover the NFL, I used to kind of like to dress flamboyantly. I would wear a hat, this sort of thing. And I'd always sit in the front row of the press conferences because I wanted to be seen, okay? I was a guy who was making $30 a story from the Johnstown Tribune-Democrat. I wanted more than that. And so I felt that if I sat in the front row, if I made sure that I asked Bill Cowher a question, and that I could have a trademark, people would recognize me, say, who is this guy? And they would read my stuff. And what I found out from afterwards is that at the time, the public relations director at the time really didn't like that. It was a feeling of, who is this guy? And yeah, I mean, sometimes that's NFL culture. You kneel for the anthem. Who is this guy? You say you're going to have a reality show when you're a 7th-round draft choice in your rookie year. Who is that guy? I mean, I felt it myself. I can only imagine what the players did if you're kind of borderline. That's my thing. And yeah, I did think that, you're right. The big picture is Kaepernick getting blackballed. I don't necessarily know if I think he's as good as you do. I get that, but yeah, that is NFL culture. We don't like someone who steps aside the grain. And that's what I would say. And I just was curious. You mentioned Big Game, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's a change to the culture,
I'm full with that. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was covering the team of Frenchie Fuqua, and the guy who was in charge of the Steelers' media relations at the time didn't like somebody who wore a hat. What's up with that? It's a team of Frenchie Fuqua. The town of Bob Prince. I'm from Tennessee, where Lindsey Nelson is from. We do dress to get attention. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, that's a whole different issue.
I know. No. But my point being is that I felt, Vito Stellino, the NFL at that point didn't like people going against the grain. I can only imagine what Kaepernick was going against. I'll give you that. I don't think he's quite as good a quarterback as you do, and I could see, maybe, Super Bowl to 1-11. Maybe we don't want that guy around for the big veteran money. But when you also add, what's he going to be like in the locker room? That's the death knell. Yeah. The question is if that's collusion or not, or if that's, well, we don't want to hire somebody that we can perceive as a clubhouse lawyer. I think that's the big question.
Yeah, well, we might have to disagree there, but 20 years from now, you would be saying, what did they do, that type of thing. History is on Kaepernick's side, and corporate America is also on his side. Ford is on his side.
Mm-hmm.
Nike is on his side. I think that America's changing as well as the diverse culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the NFL is totally out of touch, so anyway, but
I got to say, agree to disagree. I agree with you in a lot of instances on there. I do understand what's going on. I'm interested to see if that's collusion or not. I think, though, the argument may be that, okay, here's a quarterback of, maybe he could make it, maybe he couldn't, that sort of thing. But is the ancillary baggage, let's say, worthwhile to have around? I was told that as a stringer covering the NFL, hey, you're dime a dozen, act your place. Just write your story out there, sit in the second row, not the front. Don't try to get noted. That's the culture that I felt at the time. And maybe that was an individual, media relations director, but nevertheless. The guy is, by the way, the media relations director is no longer working in sports anymore. So, that's, I'll tell you off the air who it was if you'd like to know. But anyway, that's the case with that. And how do you think that he'll do? Do you think that the Nike campaign will be successful using Colin Kaepernick? After all, it's been said, hey, they're trying to target for the youth. 60-year-old people generally don't buy sports apparel. Young men do. How do you think that the ad campaign will do?
It's going to do great because you hit the nail on the head. Nike doesn't care about these eggs or like that. They don't buy their shoes anyway. Mm-hmm. It's going to appeal to the younger people who do buy shoes. It's a brilliant marketing tool. So.
Yeah, I know the stock initially was down 3%, but then it went back up. And yeah, I said yesterday, I'm not sure about this, but the more I thought about it today, I'm like, yeah, it is a decent tool, and it will establish a brand loyalty to people of a certain political culture. I think that'll happen as well.
Anyway, I have a lunch at 1 o'clock.
Okay, I realize that. It's 12:46. Vito, it is wonderful to talk to you as always. And I really enjoyed the Kaepernick discussion. And so we should look at the NFC, Rams, Packers, maybe the Eagles if Carson Wentz can come back. And you kind of like, as a sleeper team, the Chargers. Look out for them in the AFC as maybe not the quote-unquote Super Bowl, but as a sleeper team. Anyway, all right. It's Vito Stellino. If anybody knows the NFL, it's him. We'll be coming back. Tri-City Sports Now after this.
Okay.
Hey, thanks very much.